Three men want her dead. A stranger offers marriage. She has 2 weeks before exile. In the frozen wasteland of Black Hollow Ridge, Judith Caro faces a choice no woman should make: disappear into nothing or follow a mountain man into the unknown. This is her story, one of survival, blood, and a love forged in blizzards. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and stick around till the end. You won't believe where this goes. The meeting house smelled like wet wool and judgment. Judith Caro stood in the center of the room, boots planted on rough-hewn floorboards that creaked under her weight. Around her, the 6 elders of Black Hollow Ridge sat in a half circle, their faces carved from winter itself, hard, cold, unyielding. Outside, the wind screamed against the walls, rattling the shutters like something trying to get in. Or maybe trying to get out. She knew what was coming. Had known since Martha Yates started whispering at the well 2 months back, her voice dripping with concern that fooled no one. Had known since the look started, those quick, cutting glances that slid over her like hands measuring livestock. Too big, too old, too much. Elder Jacobson cleared his throat, a wet, rattling sound that seemed to bounce off the low ceiling. He was 70 if he was a day, skin like old leather, eyes the color of dirty ice. "Miss Caro," he began, and Judith almost laughed at the formality. "Miss," as if she were some delicate thing worthy of courtesy. "The council has reached a decision regarding your situation." Her situation, that's what they called it now. Not her life, not her circumstances. Her situation. Judith kept her face blank, hands folded in front of her, fingers laced tight enough that her knuckles went white. She'd learned that trick young, how to look calm when everything inside was breaking, how to stand still when you wanted to run. "We are a small community," Jacobson continued, his voice taking on that sermonic quality men like him always used when they wanted to sound righteous. "Resources are limited. Every member must contribute. Every person must carry their weight." There it was, the word that always came up. Weight. She was 28, unmarried, no prospects. And yes, bigger than most of the women here. Taller, broader, built like her father had been before the mine collapse took him. Built for work, her mother used to say, back when that was still a compliment. Now it was just another mark against her. "We've been patient," Elder Morris added from the left, his thin lips barely moving. "Generous, even. But patience has limits, Miss Caro. This settlement cannot afford to support those who refuse to fulfill their obligations." Refuse. As if she'd turned down a parade of suitors, as if men had been lining up and she'd sent them away with a laugh and a wave. The truth was simpler and so much worse. No one wanted her. Not Thomas Wheeler, who'd married 16-year-old Sarah Booth instead, even though Judith had known him since they were children. Not David Frost, who'd looked through her like glass at every gathering until he finally left for Helena with a merchant's daughter. Not even Raymond Clyde, who was 43 and missing half his teeth, who told her straight to her face that he needed a wife who could move easy in small spaces. She thought that was about the cabin size, until she saw him marry petite little Ann Winters 3 months later. "The decision," Jacobson said, pulling a piece of paper from his coat pocket with the ceremony of a judge reading a sentence, "is as follows. You will be given 2 weeks to secure a marriage proposal from a man of good standing. Should you fail to do so, you will be required to leave Black Hollow Ridge, permanently." The words hung in the air like smoke. 2 weeks. Judith's breath caught, just for a second, before she forced it steady again. 2 weeks to find a husband in a settlement where every eligible man had already passed her over. 2 weeks to somehow become smaller, younger, more desirable. 2 weeks to become someone else entirely. "This is for the good of the community," Elder Sarah Pembroke added, and Judith hated that a woman's voice was part of this. Hated that Sarah sat there in her neat dress and her neat life with her neat husband and 3 neat children, condemning another woman to exile. "We must think of the children, of our future." Our future, never hers. "Do you understand the terms, Miss Caro?" Jacobson folded the paper and tucked it away, as if her answer mattered, as if she had a choice. "I understand," Judith said, and her voice came out steady, flat, empty. "Then you're dismissed." Just like that. 10 minutes to decide her entire life. She turned and walked to the door, each step deliberate. refusing to hurry, refusing to show them the panic climbing up her throat. Behind her, she heard the scrape of chairs, the low murmur of voices already moving on to other business. She was already forgotten. The door opened with a blast of cold that stole her breath. February in the Montana Territory was a special kind of brutal, the kind that killed slow if you weren't careful, fast if you were unlucky. She stepped out into air so cold it burned her lungs, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The settlement spreads out before her in the late afternoon gloom. 23 buildings, if you counted the barns. 47 people, including children. Her entire world, contained in a cluster of structures fighting against the endless white. People were watching. They always were. Martha Yates stood outside the general store, pretending to sweep snow that would just be replaced in minutes. Her eyes tracked Judith like a hawk watching a rabbit. Near the blacksmith's, Henry Carver stopped mid-hammer swing, his face carefully neutral. Even the children playing in the street went quiet as she passed, their mothers pulling them close with quick, anxious movements. Marked. She was marked now. Everyone would know by nightfall, if they didn't already. Judith walked past them all, head up, boots crunching through snow that had frozen solid enough to hold her weight. She headed for the edge of the settlement, where the buildings gave way to white emptiness, and the tree line started its march up the mountain. Her cabin, her father's cabin really, though he'd been dead 6 years now, sat at the very edge, small and solitary. One room, a loft, a stone chimney that smoked too much in the winter. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Or it had been. She'd almost reached it when she saw him. The figure stood near the tree line, massive against the white landscape. At first she thought it was a bear. Her mind had gone there instinctively, because what else could be that size? But then it moved, and she saw the rough coat, the wide-brimmed hat, the glint of something metal at the hip. A man. Zeke Thorne. Everyone knew about Zeke, though few had spoken to him. He came down from the mountain maybe 4 times a year, traded furs and meat for supplies, then disappeared back into the wilderness. Some said he'd been a trapper. Others claimed he'd run from something back east, though no one knew what. He was huge, 6.5 feet tall at least, shoulders like a woodcutter's dream, hands that looked like they could snap a man's neck without trying. His face was hard to see under the beard and the shadow of his hat, but she'd caught glimpses before, sharp eyes, scars, the kind of face that had seen things and stopped caring about them. Most women in the settlement crossed themselves when he came to town. The men gave him space, and now he was standing outside her cabin. Judith stopped, snow squeaking under her boots. Her heart kicked against her ribs, not quite fear, but something close to it. Wariness, maybe. The animal instinct that says predator, even when the predator is standing still. Miss Caro. His voice was low, rough, like stones grinding together. He didn't move closer, just stood there watching her with eyes that caught the dying light. Mr. Thorne? She kept her voice level, chin up. Can I help you? Heard what happened. In there. He jerked his head toward the settlement center, toward the meeting house. Of course he had. Sound carried out here. Or maybe he'd just seen the way people were looking at her. News travels, she said carefully. Fast in a place like this. He took a step forward, and she forced herself not to step back. He was just a man. A big, intimidating, potentially dangerous man, but still just a man. I don't mean to be rude, Mr. Thorne, but I've had a long day. I'll marry you. The words hit like a fist. Judith stared at him, certain she'd misheard. The wind filled the silence, howling between them. What? I'll marry you, he repeated, each word deliberate and clear. You need a husband in 2 weeks. I need a wife. Simple. Simple. He said it like he was discussing the weather, like he was offering to trade a sack of flour. You don't even know me, Judith said, her voice coming out sharper than she intended. You don't. We've barely spoken. Why would you? Don't need to know you. Zeke shifted his weight, and she realized how completely still he usually held himself, like something conserving energy for the moment it's needed. Seen you work. Seen you haul water in January. Seen you split wood when the Clyde boy was supposed to do it and didn't. You're strong. You don't quit. That's what matters up there. He nodded toward the mountain. Up there. His cabin, wherever it was. Somewhere in that white wilderness that went on forever. I'm not Judith's mind raced, trying to find footing in this bizarre conversation. Mr. Thorne, I appreciate the offer, but I can't just... You got other options? He asked it bluntly, without cruelty, like he was pointing out a fact. 2 weeks, 47 people in this settlement, most of them related or married or too young. You think one of them's going to step up now, after they just threw you out? It was the truth, laid bare and ugly. I don't know you, she said again, quieter this time. No. He nodded slowly. But you know them. He gestured toward the settlement. You know what they think of you. What they'll always think of you. Out here, you're wrong. Too big. Too old. Too much. Up there, he paused and something changed in his voice, something almost gentle. Up there, you'll be exactly enough. Judith felt something crack inside her chest. Not break. Just crack. Like ice at the start of a thaw. I won't lie to you, Zeke continued. It's hard. Cabin's small. Winter's brutal. You'll work every day, harder than you've worked here. But you'll work for yourself. For us. Not for people who already decided you're worthless. They didn't say worthless, Judith said automatically, defending people who'd just exiled her. Didn't have to. Zeke's eyes held hers, and she saw something there she hadn't expected. Understanding. I know what it's like. Being too much for people who want everything small and quiet and the same. Why now? The question burst out before she could stop it. If you wanted a wife, why wait until... Didn't want one before. Simple. Honest. Do now. You need a way out. I'm offering one. That's all this is. That's all this is. A transaction. A deal between two people backed into corners. It should have felt insulting. Should have felt like another rejection, just dressed up different. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing anyone had said to her in years. I need to think, Judith said. Zeke nodded once. I'll be at the North Ridge tomorrow. Sunrise. You come, we do this. You don't. I head back up the mountain, and you figure out the next 2 weeks on your own. He turned to go, then stopped, looking back over his shoulder. For what it's worth, he said, voice barely carrying over the wind, I don't think you're too much. I think they're too small. Then he walked away, disappearing into the trees like he'd never been there at all. Judith stood alone in the snow, the wind cutting through her shawl, her future balanced on the edge of a knife. The cabin was freezing when she finally went inside. She built up the fire with shaking hands, feeding it carefully, watching the flames catch and grow. The warmth pushed back the cold by inches, reluctant and slow. She made coffee she didn't drink, sat in the chair her father had made, stared at the fire until her eyes burned. Marry a stranger, leave everything, walk into the wilderness with a man she didn't know, to a place she'd never seen, for a life she couldn't imagine. Or stay. Fight for 2 weeks to change minds that were already made up. Watch herself become invisible, then gone. Some choice. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, the wind kept screaming its endless song. Judith closed her eyes and let herself remember. Her father, teaching her to split wood properly, his big hands over hers on the axe handle. Do it right, Jude, and you'll never need a man to do it for you. Her mother, weaker every day after the fever came, whispering with her last strength, You're strong, baby girl. Stronger than any of them know. The mind collapse that took her father and 3 other men. The way the settlement had come together after, for the others. Bringing food to the widows, organizing help for the families. She'd gotten sympathy, sure. Pats on the shoulder and murmured condolences. But no real help. No offers to take her in, to find her a husband, to make sure she was settled. She'd been 17 and alone, and they'd left her that way. She'd survived anyway. Kept the cabin. Learned to trap, to fish, to make her supplies stretch through the winter. She'd worked for anyone who'd pay. Hauling, cleaning, sewing, whatever brought in enough to get by. And they'd taken it all. Taken her work, her strength, her resilience, then told her it wasn't enough. Judith opened her eyes and looked around the cabin. 1 room, familiar walls, the same 4 corners she'd known for 28 years. A cage that felt like home because she'd never known anything else. She thought about Zeke's eyes, the way he'd looked at her, not through her, not at parts of her, but at her. Seeing something these people had never seen. You'll be exactly enough. When had anyone ever said that to her? The decision settled over her like snow, quiet and inevitable. She wasn't going to beg the settlement for mercy, wasn't going to spend 2 weeks proving her worth to people who'd already decided she had none. She was going to walk away, on her own terms, with her head up. And if Zeke Thorne turned out to be a mistake, well, at least he'd be her mistake, not theirs. Judith stood, her decision made, and started packing. Sunrise came cold and clear. Judith had barely slept, her body tight with anticipation and fear. She'd packed what she could carry: clothes, a few tools, her mother's recipe box, her father's knife. Everything that mattered, condensed into 2 bags and a rolled blanket. Everything else she left behind. She walked through the settlement in the pre-dawn dark, her breath fogging in the air. No one was out yet, the building silent and still. Good. She didn't want witnesses, didn't want last-minute interventions or false concern. The North Ridge was a 20-minute walk, the path climbing gradually through snow that came up past her ankles. Her bags grew heavy, her shoulders aching, but she didn't stop. She found him waiting where the path crested, a dark shape against the lightening sky. He had a wagon, old but solid, pulled by 2 massive horses that looked built for mountain work. Supplies filled the back, covered with canvas and tied down secure. He'd been planning this, had come prepared. "You came," Zeke said, and she couldn't tell if he doubted she would. "I came," Judith confirmed. He moved forward and took her bags without asking, lifting them like they weighed nothing and securing them in the wagon. Then he turned back to her, studying her face in the growing light. "You understand what you're agreeing to?" he asked. "Once we do this, there's no coming back. They won't take you back, and I won't bring you back. You'll be mine, and I'll be yours, and that's how it stays." Mine, yours. Words that should have scared her. "I understand," Judith said. Zeke nodded slowly. "Elder Jacobson is waiting at his house. He'll do it quick and legal. Then we go." They walked back to the settlement together, silent and purposeful. The sun was just starting to touch the mountain peaks when they reached Jacobson's door. The old man answered quickly, as if he'd been waiting. His eyes widened slightly when he saw them together, but he recovered fast. "Mr. Thorne, Miss Caro." He stepped back, gesturing them inside. "I assume you're here for—" "We're here to marry," Zeke said flatly. "Now." Jacobson's wife appeared from the back room, her face carefully blank. 2 witnesses, as required. The ceremony was mechanical. Jacobson read the words from a book, his voice devoid of warmth. "Do you take this woman? Do you take this man? By the power vested." Judith spoke her vows in a steady voice, watching Zeke's face as he spoke his. His eyes never left hers. "I now pronounce you man and wife." That was it. No kiss, no celebration, no well wishes. Jacobson filled out the papers with quick, efficient strokes. "You'll need to sign here and here." Judith Caro signed her name for the last time. Judith Thorne wrote it for the first. "Congratulations," Jacobson said, though the word sounded hollow. "May you—" "We're done here," Zeke interrupted. He took the marriage certificate, folded it, tucked it inside his coat. Then he turned to Judith. "Ready?" She nodded. They walked out together, and Judith didn't look back. By the time the settlement woke properly, they were already gone. The wagon climbed steadily into the mountains, the horses moving with the confidence of a familiar route. Judith sat beside Zeke on the bench, her bags behind her, Black Hollow Ridge shrinking with every turn. The morning was bright and brutal, the sun turning the snow into a field of diamonds that hurt to look at. The path, barely visible under the snow, wound between trees that grew thicker and taller as they climbed. Zeke drove in silence, his hands steady on the reins. He'd given her a thick fur to wrap around herself, and she was grateful for it. The cold up here was different, sharper, meaner, like it had more room to build its strength. "How far?" Judith asked finally, her voice strange after the long quiet. 6 hours, if the weather holds. Zeke glanced at the sky, reading something she couldn't see. "Should hold." 6 hours deeper into the wilderness, 6 hours further from everything she'd known. "Do people come up there? Visit?" "No. Simple. Final." "Too far," Too hard. It's just us. Just us. The reality of it settled over her like a weight. She was alone with a man she'd married this morning, going to a place she'd never seen, trusting him with her life because she'd had no other choice. What had she done? "You're afraid," Zeke said, and it wasn't a question. Judith considered lying, then decided against it. "Yes." "Smart." He adjusted the reins as the path narrowed. "Fear keeps you careful. Careful keeps you alive." "Are you afraid?" She asked it impulsively, wanting to know if this strange, massive man felt anything at all. Zeke was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Of failing you, yes." The honesty of it stunned her. "I brought you up here," he continued, eyes on the path ahead. "My choice. My responsibility. You die, freeze, starve, that's on me. So yes, I'm afraid of that." "You think I'll die?" The question came out sharper than she meant it. "No." He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw that understanding again. "I think you'll survive. But surviving and living, that's different. I'm afraid you'll survive up here and hate every day of it. Hate me for bringing you. That's worse than dying, I figure." Judith didn't know what to say to that. They rode in silence for another hour, the path climbing steeper, the air growing thinner. The trees changed, pine giving way to spruce, the branches heavy with snow. Animal tracks crossed the path occasionally, but she saw no animals. "What made you come down?" Judith asked eventually. "To the settlement. What made you decide you wanted a wife?" Zeke was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Had a dream," he said finally. 3 months back, my mother came to me. She's been dead 20 years, but she was there, clear as you are now. She told me it was time, said I'd been alone long enough, said a woman would need me soon and I'd know her when I saw her." He paused, and Judith held her breath. "Saw you 2 weeks later," he continued, "at the well, hauling water. February snow coming down. Everyone else inside where it was warm. Just you out there working. I watched you make 6 trips, didn't complain, didn't quit. And I knew." "Knew what?" "That you were strong enough." He said it simply, like it explained everything. "That's all I needed to know." "You based a marriage proposal on watching me carry water?" "I based it on watching you refuse to quit when quitting made sense." Zeke glanced at her. "Everything else? We'll figure out. But that matters." The wagon crested a ridge, and suddenly the world opened up. Below and ahead, a valley spread between mountains, vast and white and untouched. In the distance, smoke rose thin and straight from a chimney, one building, small against the landscape. "There," Zeke said. "Home." Judith stared at it, her new life condensed into one cabin in endless snow, and felt terror and strange, unexpected hope war inside her chest. The horses knew the path and picked up their pace, eager for the barn. There was no going back now. There was only forward, into the unknown, beside a stranger who thought she was strong enough to survive it. Judith pulled the fur tighter and watched her future grow closer with every step. The cabin looked smaller up close. Not run down. Zeke clearly kept it maintained, but compact in a way that made Judith's chest tighten. One main room, maybe 15 by 20 feet. A loft visible through the gap between the walls and the pitched roof. Stone chimney on the west side, smoke still rising from it. A barn set back about 30 yards, sturdy and weathered. That was it. Her entire world now contained in 2 structures and whatever lay beyond them in the white emptiness. Zeke brought the wagon to a stop near the barn and climbed down without a word. The horses stamped and blew, their breath clouding in the cold air. He moved to unhitch them with practiced efficiency, his hands working the buckles and straps like he'd done it 1,000 times. Judith sat frozen on the bench, suddenly unable to move. The reality of what she'd done crashed over her in waves. She'd married a stranger. She was 6 hours from anyone who knew her name. The sun was already starting its slide toward the horizon, and night came fast and brutal this far up. "You planning to sit there till you freeze?" Zeke's voice cut through her spiral. He stood by the horses, looking at her with something that might have been amusement, might have been concern. Hard to tell. "No." Judith forced herself to move, climbing down from the bench. Her legs were stiff from the long ride, and she stumbled slightly on the packed snow. Zeke caught her elbow, steadying her. His hand was enormous, swallowing her arm, but his grip was careful. Ground's uneven here. Watch your step. He let go as soon as she found her balance and turned back to the horses, leading them toward the barn. Judith followed, not sure what else to do. The barn was warmer than outside, insulated by hay and animal heat. 2 other horses occupied stalls on the left, and she could hear chickens somewhere in the back. Zeke led his team to empty stalls, removing their harnesses with steady, methodical movements. "There's grain in that barrel," he said, nodding toward the corner. 2 scoops each, in the buckets hanging there. It took Judith a moment to realize he was giving her something to do. She found the barrel, the scoops, the buckets. The grain smelled sweet and dusty. She measured carefully, 2 scoops each, then brought them to the stalls where Zeke was brushing down the first horse. He glanced at the buckets, nodded once. Good. That single word of approval shouldn't have mattered, but it did. They worked in silence, tending the horses, filling water troughs from a pump in the corner that took serious effort to operate. The chickens, 6 of them, pecked around in a penned area filled with straw. Zeke scattered feed for them from a tin bucket, and they swarmed his boots like he was the most important thing in their world. "They lay?" Judith asked. "Most days. Less in deep winter, but enough." He hung the bucket back on its hook. "You know chickens?" "Some. We had them when my father was alive." Zeke nodded, processing this information. "You'll take them over then, feeding, collecting eggs, keeping the pen clean. That's yours." Yours. The word carried weight, responsibility, territory. "All right," Judith said. They finished in the barn as the light outside shifted from white to gold. Zeke grabbed her bags from the wagon bed like they weighed nothing and headed for the cabin. Judith followed, her heart climbing into her throat. This was it. The moment she'd been trying not to think about. Night coming. Married. Alone with him in that small space. The cabin door opened with a creak that said it had been doing that for years. Inside was warmer, heat radiating from the fireplace where logs burned steady and red. The space was exactly what she'd expected from the outside. Efficient, sparse, built for function over comfort. A table with 2 chairs occupied the center. A cook stove sat against one wall, black iron and business. Shelves lined another wall, filled with supplies in neat rows, flour, salt, dried beans, coffee, everything labeled in rough handwriting. A workbench covered the far corner, tools hung on the wall above it in organized chaos. The loft ladder went up on the right side, disappearing into shadows. One narrow bed sat against the left wall. Judith's stomach dropped. Zeke set her bags down near the bed and straightened, following her gaze. He stood there for a moment, silent, then cleared his throat. "That's yours, Matt," he said, nodding at the bed. Judith's eyes snapped to him. "What?" "The bed. It's yours." He moved to the loft ladder, gesturing up. "I sleep there. Have been for years. No reason to change it." Relief flooded through her so fast she felt dizzy. "I know what you thought." Zeke's voice was flat, matter of fact. "I'm not interested in that. Not until you are. If you are. This is a marriage on paper because that's what you needed. Everything else, we figure it out as we go." He said it like it was simple, like he was discussing crop rotation. "Most men wouldn't," Judith started. "I'm not most men." He cut her off, not unkindly. "And you're not most women, or you wouldn't be here. We do this our way. Nobody else's rules matter anymore." Judith stared at him, this massive stranger who'd just given her something she hadn't expected. Safety, space, choice. "Thank you," she said quietly. Zeke shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with gratitude. "Stew's in the pot. Should still be warm. You hungry?" She was, she realized. Hadn't eaten since yesterday, her stomach too twisted with anxiety. "Yes." "Then eat." He moved to the shelves, pulling down bowls and spoons. "I need to check the trap line before dark. Won't be more than an hour. You get settled, learn where things are. This is your place now, too." He ladled stew into 2 bowls, thick with meat and vegetables, smelling better than anything she'd had in months, and set one in front of her at the table. Then he grabbed his own, eating standing up, fast and efficient, like a man who'd learned to fuel himself rather than enjoy food. Judith sat and tasted the stew. It was good, really good. Venison, she thought, with carrots and potatoes and something she couldn't identify but liked. "You made this?" she asked. "This morning, before I came down." Zeke finished his bowl and set it in a basin near the stove. "Cooking's basic up here. I'll teach you what I know. Probably not much compared to what you can do." "I can cook," Judith admitted, "but I don't know how to—" She gestured vaguely at everything. The wilderness, the isolation, the life she'd just stepped into. "You'll learn." He pulled on a heavy coat from a peg near the door. "Same as I did. Same as everyone does. You're smart enough, strong enough. Rest is just practice." He opened the door, letting in a blast of cold, then paused and looked back at her. "Judith." It was the first time he'd used her first name, and hearing it in his rough voice did something strange to her chest. "You're safe here. From the weather, from animals, from me. Whatever you're afraid of, put it aside. Fear's useful when it keeps you alert, useless when it keeps you frozen. Understand?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good. I'll be back soon." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him, and Judith was alone in the cabin that was somehow hers now. She sat at the table and finished her stew slowly, letting the warmth spread through her. Then she stood and started exploring. The shelves revealed a man who planned ahead. Everything was organized, labeled, rationed. Enough supplies to last months if they needed to. Coffee in a sealed tin, sugar carefully measured, dried meat hanging in a corner she'd missed, wrapped in cloth. The workbench held tools she recognized and some she didn't. A whetstone, well used. Knives in various stages of sharpening, wire and nails and things for trapping. A book tucked against the wall, she pulled it out, curious. A journal, pages filled with neat handwriting. Weather observations, animal sightings, practical notes about the mountain and its patterns. She put it back carefully, feeling like she'd glimpsed something private. The loft ladder was sturdy under her hands as she climbed up, curiosity overcoming caution. The space above was small, just enough room for a bedroll and a few personal items. Spare clothes folded in a trunk. Another book, this one on wilderness survival. A tin box that she didn't open. This was where he slept. Where he'd been sleeping alone for however many years he'd lived up here. Judith climbed back down and looked at the bed that was now hers. It was narrow but well made, the frame solid pine, the mattress stuffed with something that gave slightly when she pressed it. Blankets piled thick, furs layered on top. He'd prepared this, had known she was coming and made space for her. She unpacked her bag slowly, finding places for her few belongings. Her clothes went on hooks near the bed. Her mother's recipe box on the shelf, looking small and out of place among the practical supplies. Her father's knife she kept close, sliding it under the pillow. Old habit. Old fear. The light was fading when Zeke returned, stamping snow off his boots outside before entering. He carried something over his shoulder, a rabbit, already cleaned and gutted. "Trapline's good," he announced, hanging the rabbit on a hook near the door. "We'll smoke that tomorrow." Judith had moved to the cook stove, figuring out how it worked, heating water in a kettle she'd found. She turned at his voice. "Do you check it every day?" "Most days, weather permitting." He shrugged off his coat and she saw ice crystals in his beard. "Animals don't care about storms, neither can we." "How many traps?" 20, spread over 2 miles. Not all are set at once. Depends on the season, what's moving. He moved to the basin and washed his hands with water from a bucket, scrubbing hard. "You'll come with me tomorrow. Learn the routes." It wasn't a question, but Judith answered anyway. "All right." They fell into silence, the kind that wasn't quite comfortable but wasn't hostile either. Zeke added logs to the fire, building it up for the night. Judith found cups and made coffee, strong and black the way the pot suggested it should be made. She handed him a cup and he took it with a nod of thanks. They sat at the table, drinking coffee as darkness pressed against the windows. The wind had picked up, making the cabin creak and settle. Inside was warm, almost cozy. Outside was the void. "You got questions?" Zeke said finally. "Ask them." Judith wrapped her hands around her cup, gathering courage. "How long have you been up here?" 8 years. Built this place the first winter, nearly died doing it. Got smarter after that." "Why here? Why leave? Wherever you came from." His jaw worked for a moment like he was chewing on whether to answer. "Pennsylvania, steel mill town. Worked there till I was 25, doing what my father did, what his father did. Then the mill closed. Town died slow after that. I watched people fight over scraps, turn on each other for nothing. Decided I'd rather face the mountain than that. No family. Mother died when I was 19, father a year later. No siblings, no wife, no children, nothing keeping me. He drank his coffee, eyes distant. So I walked away, headed west till I found a place that felt right. This did. You ever regret it? Sometimes. Winter gets long, loneliness gets heavy. But regret going back? He shook his head. Never. Out here things are simple. You work, you survive. You don't, you die. No politics, no gossip, no judgment. Just you and the mountain doesn't care who you are. Judith understood that more than she wanted to admit. What about you? Zeke asked. Your father, what happened? She'd known the question would come eventually. Mine collapse. 6 years ago. He went down one morning and didn't come back up. They got the bodies out 3 days later. And your mother? Fever took her 2 years before that, fast and mean. Judith stared into her coffee. I was alone at 17. Settlement helped at first, then forgot. I managed. More than managed from what I saw. Zeke leaned back in his chair, studying her. You kept a homestead running solo for 6 years. That's not easy. Wasn't much choice. There's always a choice. You chose to survive instead of fold. That tells me what I need to know. They finished their coffee in silence. Outside, something howled, distant and eerie. Judith tensed, but Zeke didn't react. Wolf, he said calmly. Mile off, maybe more. They don't come close to the cabin much. Fire and human smell keeps them cautious. Much? Had one test the barn door last winter. Shot over its head, it ran. Haven't seen it since. He stood, collecting the cups. They're not the danger people think, just hungry and opportunistic. You respect them, they respect you back. Judith wasn't sure she believed that, but she nodded anyway. You should sleep, Zeke said, moving to bank the fire for the night. Tomorrow starts early. 4:30, maybe 5. We check traps, tend animals, chop wood. Then I start teaching you what you need to know. 4:30. Judith tried not to wince. All right. Privy's out back 30 feet. Path's clear. Chamber pot's under the bed if you need it at night. He said it matter-of-factly. No embarrassment. Water barrels by the door. Cups and bowls go in the basin. We wash up every few days when we heat enough water. Every few days. She was used to more frequent washing, but up here, water was work. Heat was work. Everything was work. Understood, Judith said. Zeke nodded and moved to the loft ladder. He climbed with surprising grace for a man his size, disappearing into the shadows above. She heard him moving around, settling in. Judith used the privy, a quick, freezing trip that made her understand the chamber pot's appeal, and came back inside to find the cabin dim and quiet. The fire had been reduced to glowing coals, just enough to keep the worst of the cold at bay. She changed into her nightdress quickly, shivering, and climbed into the bed. The blankets were heavy and smelled like cedar and smoke. The furs on top trapped heat immediately. From the loft, she heard Zeke shift, the bedroll creaking. Judith, his voice came down through the darkness. Yes? You did good today. Coming up here. Not falling apart. It's harder than you think, leaving everything. She lay there staring at the ceiling she couldn't see, feeling the weight of those words. Thank you, she whispered. No response. Just breathing, steady and deep as he fell asleep. Judith closed her eyes and tried to do the same. The cabin settled around her, wood contracting in the cold, wind testing the shutters. Strange sounds in a strange place, but beneath the strangeness was something else. Safety, maybe. Or the beginning of it. She'd survived the first day. Tomorrow would bring the next test. The days that followed blurred into a pattern that was equal parts exhausting and enlightening. Zeke woke her before dawn that first morning, his voice rough with sleep. Up, we're burning daylight. Judith stumbled out of bed, groggy and disoriented, fumbling into her clothes in the cold. Zeke already had the fire built up and coffee brewing. He handed her a cup and a piece of hard bread. Eat while you dress. We move in 10 minutes. She learned quickly that Zeke didn't waste time or words. When he said 10 minutes, he meant it. They started with the animals. Feeding, watering, collecting eggs from chickens who seemed offended by the early hour. Zeke showed her how much grain each horse needed, which one was prone to colic, which hen was broody and needed watching. Then came the trap line. The route wound through forest so thick the snow barely reached the ground in places. Zeke moved through it like he'd done it 1,000 times, which he had. He showed her each trap, explained how it worked, what it was designed to catch. "You check them the same order every time," he said, crouching by a trap that held a dead marten. "Build the routine into your body. Weather gets bad, visibility drops, you need to find these by memory and feel." He reset the trap with quick, efficient movements, then skinned the marten on the spot, working so fast Judith barely tracked what he was doing. "You try the next one," he said, handing her the knife. She botched it. Cut through the pelt in 2 places, wasted meat by going too shallow, took 3 times as long as he had. Zeke watched without comment until she finished, then nodded. "Better than most first tries. You'll get faster." That became the pattern. He'd demonstrate, she'd attempt, he'd correct without judgment. Over and over until her hands learned the movements her brain couldn't quite grasp yet. Wood chopping came next. Zeke had a system: fell the dead trees in a specific area, limb them on site, haul the trunks back on a sled the horses pulled. Then split everything into sizes for different purposes. "Big logs for overnight burns," he explained, demonstrating the axe work. "Medium for cooking. Small for starting fires. You keep all 3 stocked. You're never caught short." He made it look effortless, the axe coming down in perfect arcs, wood splitting clean. When Judith tried, she missed the sweet spot 3 times before finally sinking the blade true. "Don't muscle it," Zeke said. "Let gravity do the work. You're just guiding. Let gravity do the work." She tried again, adjusting her stance, her grip, her timing. The wood split, not perfectly, but it split. "There," Zeke said, and she heard approval in his voice. "Again." Every day brought new lessons: how to read weather signs in the clouds and wind, which plants were edible, which would kill you, how to preserve meat, smoking, salting, freezing, how to repair things that broke, because up here, everything eventually broke and you couldn't just replace it. Zeke was a patient teacher, she realized. Gruff, blunt, but patient. He didn't expect perfection, just effort and attention. When she failed, and she failed often those first days, he'd simply say, "Try again." Never disappointment, never anger, just steady expectation that she'd figure it out. The nights developed their own rhythm. After dinner, which they took turns cooking, though Zeke admitted her meals were better, they'd sit by the fire and he'd talk, not about feelings or fears, but about practical things. The history of the cabin, the mountain's patterns, stories of close calls and hard winters. "2 years ago, snow came early," he said one night, whittling a piece of wood into something she couldn't identify yet. "October storm, 3 feet in 2 days. I wasn't ready. Hadn't finished the meat preserving, hadn't secured the barn roof properly, lost 4 chickens when part of it collapsed." "How'd you survive?" "Rationed hard, trapped more than usual, learned to waste nothing." He paused in his whittling. "That's the thing about the mountain. It'll teach you, but the lessons are harsh. You either learn or die. No middle ground." "You ever come close?" "To dying. Once." His hands stilled. "First winter. Fell through ice on the creek, soaked to the bone. Temperature dropping. Cabin was 2 miles away. I ran, which you're not supposed to do. Burns energy, makes you sweat, makes it worse. But I knew if I stopped, I'd freeze where I stood. Made it back, stripped, got in front of the fire. Shook so hard I thought my teeth would break." "But you survived." "Obviously." A hint of dark humor. "But it was close, taught me respect. The mountain doesn't care about your plans or your confidence. It just is. You adapt or it kills you." Judith absorbed these stories like lessons, filing them away. How to think up here. How to survive. She was learning more than wilderness skills, she realized. She was learning Zeke. He was a man of routines and systems, everything done the same way every time because consistency kept you alive. He was careful but not fearful, taking calculated risks. He wasted nothing, not food, not materials, not time. Every action had purpose, but he wasn't cold, just focused. She saw it in small things, the way he'd automatically hand her the warmer cup of coffee, How he'd check her boots before they went out, making sure they were properly laced. The time she'd struggled with a frozen water pump, and he'd appeared silently, adding his strength to hers without making her feel weak for needing it. He was taking care of her, she realized, in his own rough way. A week in, she woke in the middle of the night to strange sounds. Scratching, snuffling, something moving outside the cabin. Her heart hammered as she sat up, reaching for her father's knife. Above, she heard Zeke moving. He descended the ladder silent as smoke, rifle in hand. He didn't say anything, just moved to the window and looked out. His body tense, but controlled. The sounds continued. Closer now, right outside the door. Zeke opened it fast, the rifle up. Judith saw something massive and dark scatter back into the night. A bear, she thought, though it moved too fast to be sure. He fired once, the shot deafening in the stillness, then silence. Zeke closed the door and secured it, setting the rifle aside. Bear, young male probably, testing boundaries. Will it come back? Maybe, but now it knows we shoot back. He moved to the fire, adding a log. You all right? Yes. Her hands were shaking, but she was all right. Fear's normal. Using it is smart. He glanced at her, still in her nightdress with a knife clutched in her hand, and something like respect crossed his face. You were ready to fight. I didn't know what else to do. Fighting's always an option, sometimes the only one. He banked the fire again and moved to the ladder. Try to sleep. Morning comes whether we're rested or not. Judith lay back down, but sleep was elusive. She kept hearing the bear, kept seeing Zeke with the rifle, calm and deadly. This was her life now. Bears at the door, wolves in the distance, cold that could kill, and a man who stood between her and all of it with quiet, unshakable competence. She'd thought the settlement was hard, but this was something else entirely. This was survival at its most basic. No pretense, no politics, just life and death measured day by day. And somehow, impossibly, she was starting to feel capable of it. 2 weeks in, Zeke handed her the rifle before they left for the trapline. Your turn, he said simply. Judith stared at the weapon. She'd shot before. Her father had taught her the basics, but that was years ago and never for anything serious. I don't... You do. I've watched you. Your hands are steady. Your eyes are good. You just need practice. He gestured to a tree about 30 yards out, where he'd carved a rough circle in the bark. Show me what you know. She lifted the rifle, fighting the urge to rush, breathed like her father had taught her, aimed, fired, missed the circle entirely, the bullet slamming into bark 2 feet left. Again, Zeke said. She fired 5 more times, hitting the tree, but never the mark. Frustration burned through her. You're pulling left, Zeke said, moving behind her, anticipating the recoil. Don't fight the gun. Work with it. His hands came to her shoulders, adjusting her stance. Feet wider. Lean into it more. The rifle kicks back, you let it, then bring it back to center. He stepped away. Try now. Judith aimed again, adjusted her stance, breathed, fired. The bullet hit the circle, not center, but inside it. There, satisfaction in Zeke's voice. That's the baseline. Now you practice till it's consistent. They spent an hour there, Judith firing until her shoulder ached and her ears rang. By the end, she was hitting the circle more often than not. Good enough for now, Zeke said, taking the rifle. We'll do this every few days. You need to be able to shoot well enough to protect yourself, protect the cabin. I won't always be here. That last part sent ice through her chest. Where would you be? Down to trade sometimes. Takes 2 days there and back. Or if I'm hurt, trapped, whatever. Things happen on the mountain. He met her eyes. You need to be able to survive without me. That's not optional. The weight of that settled over her. She'd been relying on him completely, she realized, counting on his knowledge, his strength. But what if he wasn't there? I understand, she said. Do you? Zeke's gaze was intense. Because I need to know you can handle this place alone if you have to. That's not about doubting you. It's about reality. The mountain doesn't care that you're new here. It doesn't give you practice runs. You're either ready or you're not. Then teach me how to be ready, Judith said, hearing steel in her own voice. Don't protect me from it. Teach me to face it. Something shifted in Zeke's expression. Pride, maybe. or recognition? All right, he said, then let's get started. The teaching became relentless after that conversation. Zeke pushed her harder, expected more, gave less quarter. He showed her how to read animal tracks in snow, the difference between a deer's gait and an elk's, how to tell if a predator was hunting or just passing through. He taught her to navigate by landmarks when the trail disappeared under fresh powder, how to find north when the sky was nothing but gray. Look at the trees, he said one morning, pointing to a cluster of pines. Moss grows thicker on the north side. Branches are fuller on the south where they get more sun. The mountain tells you everything if you know how to listen. Judith studied the trees, seeing patterns she'd walked past a dozen times without noticing. The world was full of information she'd been blind to, written in bark and snow and wind direction. What if I get lost? She asked. You won't. Zeke's certainty was absolute. Because you'll pay attention. And if something happens anyway, you know where the cabin is. He pointed southeast. 2 miles, straight line. But you follow the creek instead. Takes longer, but you can't miss it. Creek always leads home. Home. The word sat strange in her mouth, but she was starting to understand it. Not as a place of comfort, the mountain didn't offer that, but as a place she was learning to read, to predict, to survive in. 3 weeks in, she woke to silence. Not the usual morning quiet, but something deeper. Wrong. She sat up in bed, listening. No wind, no animal sounds, nothing. Zeke was already descending from the loft, moving fast. Storm's coming. Big one. Judith looked toward the window. The sky was an ugly yellowish gray, clouds hanging low and swollen. How do you know? Pressure change. You feel it in your bones after a while. He was already pulling on extra layers, his movements quick but controlled. We've got maybe 2 hours before it hits. We need to prepare. The next hour was chaos with purpose. They brought extra firewood inside, stacking it near the hearth until there was barely room to move. Secured the barn, double-checking every latch and hinge. Moved the chickens into a reinforced pen inside where they'd be protected. Brought in snow to melt for water, filling every container they had. Zeke checked the food stores, doing mental calculations. If we get snowed in for a week, we're fine. 2 weeks, we'll stretch. More than that, he shrugged. We'll manage. Has it ever been more than 2 weeks? Once. 3 weeks, my second winter here. Thought I'd lose my mind from the cabin fever. He secured the last water barrel. But I didn't, you won't either. The storm hit like a fist. One moment there was stillness. The next, wind slammed into the cabin with force that made the walls groan. Snow came sideways, so thick Judith couldn't see the barn 30 yards away. Zeke had been right. This was big. They spent the first day reinforcing everything. Zeke went out twice in full gear to check the barn, coming back covered in ice, breath wheezing. The second time, Judith grabbed his arm before he could go. You'll freeze out there. Animals need checking. His face was hard with determination. Then I'm coming with you. No. Yes. Judith pulled on her heaviest coat, the one Zeke had given her from his own supplies. You said I need to be able to handle this place. That includes storms. Zeke studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. Stay close. You lose sight of me, you're dead. Understand? They roped themselves together, a precaution that seemed excessive until they stepped outside and the wind nearly knocked Judith off her feet. The world was white chaos, snow driving so hard it felt like needles against her face. She kept one hand on the rope, the other clutching Zeke's coat as they fought their way to the barn. Inside was marginally better. The horses were spooked, eyes rolling white. Zeke moved among them, speaking in a low, steady voice that somehow cut through the storm's roar. Judith checked the chickens, made sure the water hadn't frozen yet, added feed. The trip back to the cabin was worse. The wind had shifted, driving directly into their faces. Judith's lungs burned with cold, her eyes streaming tears that froze on her cheeks. She stumbled, went down to one knee, felt Zeke's hand haul her up immediately. Keep moving, he shouted over the wind. She did, one step after another, until finally the cabin door appeared and they tumbled inside, slamming it shut behind them. They stood there gasping, ice falling off their clothes in chunks. Judith's hands were numb inside her gloves, her face burning as feeling returned. That, Zeke said between breaths, is what you're up against. That's the mountain showing you what it can do. Judith nodded, too winded to speak. You did good, he added. and the approval in his voice warmed her more than the fire. Didn't panic, didn't quit. That's what matters. The storm lasted 4 days. 4 days trapped in the cabin with nothing to do but maintain the fire, eat sparingly, and wait. Judith learned why Zeke had mentioned cabin fever. The walls pressed in, the constant howl of wind became maddening, the sameness of each hour grinding on her nerves. But she also learned other things. She learned that Zeke carved to keep his hands busy, creating small figures from scrap wood, animals mostly, surprisingly detailed. She learned he could play chess using a set he'd made himself, and that he played ruthlessly, never letting her win. No point in false victories, he said after crushing her in 12 moves. You want to get better? You play against someone better. She learned he'd read more than she expected. The books in his loft weren't just practical guides. There were novels, poetry, even a battered copy of philosophy essays that he admitted he didn't fully understand but kept rereading anyway. Gets lonely up here, he said one night, firelight playing across his face. Books are company. They ask questions, make you think about things beyond survival. What kind of questions? What makes a life worth living? Whether solitude is freedom or just another kind of prison. If choosing to be alone means you're running from something or running toward something. He stared into the fire. I still don't have answers, but I like that the questions exist. Judith found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone. About the loneliness in Black Hollow Ridge, how she'd felt invisible for years before the council made it official. About her parents, the good memories and the hard ones. About the shame of being unwanted, how it had burrowed into her bones until she believed it herself. That's what they do, Zeke said quietly. Small places. Small minds. They make you believe you're the problem when, really, you're just different, and different scares people. You ever wish you fit in? Somewhere? Used to. Not anymore. He leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking. I fit here. With the mountain. It doesn't care if I'm strange or too big or too quiet. It just cares if I'm smart enough to survive it. That's honest. I'll take honest over comfortable any day. On the third night of the storm, Judith woke to Zeke moving around downstairs. She climbed down from her bed. They'd switched sleeping arrangements on day 2 and the loft proved too cold even for him and found him pacing. Can't sleep? She asked. Never sleep well in storms. He moved to the window, peering out into nothing but white. Keep thinking something's going to fail. Barn roof, cabin wall, something. Won't relax until I can check everything. How much longer? Storm? Day, maybe. Could be 6 hours, could be 30. He rubbed his face and she saw the fatigue there. We're fine either way. I just don't like waiting. You're a man of action, Judith said, surprising herself with the observation. Zeke turned to look at her. And you're a woman who's stronger than she knows. We've established what we are. Question is what we become. What does that mean? He was quiet for a long moment, and Judith wondered if he'd answer at all. Then he moved back to the fire, settling into his chair. I told you I had a dream. About my mother, about finding a wife. What I didn't tell you, he paused, choosing words carefully. She said you'd give me children, strong ones, a family. That's why I came down, why I asked. The words hit Judith like cold water. Children. He'd married her expecting children. I can't promise that, she said, her voice tight. I know. Zeke looked at her directly. I'm not asking you to. When I first came down, I thought, I don't know what I thought, that it was destiny or fate or whatever you want to call it. But these weeks with you, I've realized something. What? You're not here to give me something. You're here because you chose to be. And whatever happens between us, that's a choice too. Not destiny, not obligation, choice. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. So I'm not expecting children. I'm not expecting anything except what you're willing to give. And if that's just partnership, just survival together, that's enough. Judith felt something shift in her chest. Relief, yes, but also something else. Gratitude, maybe. Or the beginning of trust. I don't know what I can give you, she admitted. I don't know what I want. I've spent so long just trying to exist, I never thought about living. Then figure it out here. No rush, we've got time. The storm broke on the 4th day, the wind dying to nothing, the snow stopping as abruptly as it started. They woke to brilliant sunshine and a world transformed. Snow had drifted against the cabin to the windows on one side. The path to the barn was buried under 4 feet of white. Zeke surveyed it all with grim determination. We dig some more. They worked for hours, clearing paths, checking structures, making sure the animals had survived. Everything had held. Zeke's preparations had been thorough. But it was exhausting work, and by nightfall, Judith's muscles screamed and her hands were blistered despite gloves. "You earned your rest," Zeke said over dinner, ladling stew into her bowl. "Tomorrow we start maintenance. Check the traps that aren't buried, repair anything damaged. Day after that, back to normal." Normal? Judith almost laughed. What was normal anymore? But she was learning the rhythms of this life, the cycles of work and rest, storm and calm. She was growing stronger, she realized, not just physically, though that too her body adapting to the constant labor, but mentally. The fear that had followed her from Black Hollow Ridge was fading, replaced by competence. She could do this. She was doing this. A week after the storm, Zeke left for Black Hollow Ridge to trade. 2 days down, 1 day to trade, 2 days back, he explained, loading the wagon with furs and smoked meat. 5 days total, maybe 6 if the weather turns. You'll be fine. Judith stood in the snow, watching him prepare, and felt anxiety creep up her spine. What if something happens? Then you handle it. He secured the last bundle and turned to face her. I've taught you everything you need to know. Food's stocked, firewood's ready, traps are set. Animals know you now. They won't give you trouble. You're ready for this. I don't feel ready. No one ever does. Zeke pulled on his heavy coat, checking his supplies one last time. But ready isn't a feeling, it's a fact. And the fact is, you can survive 5 days alone. I know it. You need to know it too. He climbed onto the wagon, taking the reins. The horses stamped, eager to move. Judith. He looked down at her, his expression serious. Something feels wrong. Trust your gut. Something breaks. Fix it, or leave it till I'm back. Don't take stupid risks. The mountain doesn't reward bravery. It rewards caution. I understand. Good. He hesitated like he wanted to say something else, then just nodded. I'll be back soon. The wagon rolled forward, and Judith watched it disappear down the mountain path, taking with it the only other person in her world. Then she was alone. Truly, completely alone in a way she'd never been, even in the settlement. There she'd been lonely, but surrounded by people. Here, there was nothing but white silence and herself. The first day was fine. She followed the routine. Animals, breakfast, trap checking, wood splitting, more animal care, dinner, sleep. She kept busy, kept moving, didn't let herself think about the emptiness. The second day was harder. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow could be a threat. She found herself talking to the chickens, to the horses, just to hear a voice. The third day, something went wrong. She was checking the nearest traps when she heard it, a low, rumbling growl that raised every hair on her body. She froze, rifle in hand, scanning the tree line. The wolf stepped into view 50 yards away, big, gray, watching her with yellow eyes that held intelligence and hunger in equal measure. Judith's heart hammered against her ribs. Zeke had said they stayed away, had said they were cautious. This one didn't look cautious. It looked interested. She raised the rifle slowly, remembering Zeke's lessons. Don't run. Don't show fear. Make yourself big. Make noise. Get, she shouted, her voice cracking. Go on! The wolf tilted its head, considering. Didn't move. Judith fired into the air, the shot echoing through the trees. The wolf flinched but didn't run, just backed up a few steps, still watching. Another growl, this one from her left. A second wolf, smaller, circling. They were hunting, and she was the prey. Panic threatened to swallow her whole. 2 wolves. Limited ammunition. Half a mile from the cabin. Think. What would Zeke do? Don't run. Running triggers the chase. Back away slowly. Keep the rifle ready. Make noise. Judith started backing up, keeping both wolves in her line of sight. Get out of here, go! The smaller one darted forward, testing. She swung the rifle toward it, and it stopped. They were working together, probing her defenses, looking for weakness. I'm not easy prey, Judith said, her voice steadier now. You want to try me, one of you dies, maybe both. She fired again, this time at the ground between them. Snow exploded, and finally, they broke. The smaller one bolted first, the larger one following after one last measured look. Judith stood there shaking, rifle still raised, until she was certain they were gone. Then she ran. She made it back to the cabin, slammed the door, secured it with trembling hands. Her breath came in gasps, her heart trying to break out of her chest. She'd faced wolves, alone, and survived. The fear slowly gave way to something else. Pride, fierce and unexpected. She'd done it, hadn't frozen, hadn't collapsed, had trusted her training, and made it home. When Zeke returned 2 days later, she was waiting outside, feeding the chickens like it was any other morning. He pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down, his eyes scanning her, the cabin, everything. Any trouble? Wolves, Judith said simply. 2 of them, day 3. Zeke went very still. And? I scared them off, fired twice, stood my ground. They decided I wasn't worth it. A slow smile spread across Zeke's face, transforming it. I knew you could do it. You knew wolves would come? I suspected something might test you. Mountain does that. Waits till you're alone, then sees what you're made of. He moved to unload supplies. You passed. Judith helped him, her hands steady now. It was terrifying. Fear means you're smart. Surviving it means you're strong. He glanced at her, something like respect, no, more than respect in his eyes. You're not the woman who left Black Hollow Ridge anymore, you know that? She did know, could feel it in her bones, in the way she moved through the world now, confident, capable. I'm not, she agreed. Good. Zeke shouldered a bag of supplies. Because what's coming next, you'll need to be this woman, the strong one. Judith stopped, a chill running through her. What do you mean? What's coming? Zeke's face went hard. Heard things in the settlement. Men asking about you. Where you went, who you married. 3 of them. They left 2 days ago, headed this direction. The bottom dropped out of Judith's stomach. Who? Couldn't get names, but I got descriptions. His jaw clenched. One of them was Raymond Clyde. Raymond. The man who'd told her she was too big for his cabin. Who'd looked at her like she was livestock, found her wanting, and married someone else. Why would they come here? But even as she asked, she knew. She'd seen it before in men who thought women were property. They want to take me back. Or worse. Zeke set down the supplies and turned to face her fully. I don't know their plan, but 3 men don't track someone through a mountain winter out of concern. They want something. What do we do? We prepare. Zeke moved to the cabin, his mind clearly already working through scenarios. They're 2 days behind me, maybe less if they pushed hard. That gives us time to get ready. Ready for what? Zeke looked at her, and she saw something dangerous in his eyes. Something that had been hidden under the patient teacher, the careful provider. To make sure they understand you're not going anywhere, he said quietly, and that taking you by force isn't an option they'll survive. They worked through the night with grim efficiency. Zeke moved around the cabin like a man preparing for war, checking weapons, securing supplies, creating defensive positions. He brought in ammunition from a cache in the barn Judith hadn't known existed, stacking boxes near the windows. How many guns do you have? She asked, watching him clean a second rifle with practiced hands. Enough. He didn't look up from his work. 2 rifles, a shotgun, 3 pistols, knife collection you've seen, axe, hatchet, various tools that can be weapons if needed. You were expecting something like this. I expect everything up here. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. He set the rifle aside and started on the shotgun. Worlds full of men who think they're owed things. Women, land, respect they didn't earn. I've met enough of them to know you don't reason with that kind. You just make sure they understand the cost. Judith sat across from him, her hands restless. What if they're just checking on me? What if the settlement sent them to... Oh, the settlement doesn't care enough to send anyone. Zeke's voice was flat, certain. And even if they did, they wouldn't send Raymond Clyde. Man's got a mean streak and a taste for control. You said he told you that thing about small spaces? Yes? That wasn't about the cabin. That was about you. Wanting you small, manageable, afraid. Zeke looked up, his eyes hard. Men like that don't track someone through winter mountains to check on their welfare. They come to take what they think is theirs. I was never his. Doesn't matter what's true. Matters what he believes. Zeke loaded the shotgun with slow, deliberate movements. And we need to be ready to correct that belief. permanently, if necessary. The word hung in the air between them, permanently, meaning killing, meaning blood. Judith's hands started shaking. I can't. You shot at wolves 3 days ago, Zeke interrupted. Stood your ground when running made more sense. This is the same thing, just with different predators. People aren't wolves. Some are worse. He set the shotgun aside and leaned forward, his full attention on her. Listen to me. I don't want to kill anyone. I'll try every way around it. But if it comes down to them or you, there's no question. You understand? No hesitation, no mercy. They made their choice when they came up here. We're just making sure they live with the consequences. Judith nodded, though her stomach churned. She thought of Raymond, his narrow face and narrower mind, the way he'd looked at her like she was defective merchandise. She thought of the 2 men with him, faceless but just as dangerous. What do we do? She asked. First, we make this place defensible. Zeke stood, moving to the window. Limited approaches. They'll come from the trail most likely. 3 men won't know the shortcuts, won't risk getting lost. That gives us advantage. We see them coming, we have time to prepare. He spent the next hour showing her firing positions, angles of approach, where to take cover if shooting started. The cabin became a tactical map in his mind, every corner and shadow a potential asset or liability. You take the south window, he said, positioning her. Gives you clear sight on the main trail. I'll take north and west. East is blind, but there's no good approach from that side, too steep, too exposed. They'd be stupid to try it. And if they're stupid, then they die tired. No emotion in his voice, just fact. You see movement, you call it out. Don't shoot unless I give the word or they shoot first. We give them a chance to turn around. One chance. After that we fight, Judith finished. After that we survive. Zeke checked the rifle she held, making sure she knew how to work it. Remember your training. Breathe, aim, fire. Don't think about who's on the other end, just think about staying alive. They worked through scenarios until dawn broke, pale and cold. Then Zeke made them eat, forcing food down throats tight with tension. They won't come in darkness, he said, chewing mechanically. Too dangerous, can't see the terrain. They'll wait for light, come in careful. Probably today, maybe tomorrow. How do you know? Because that's what I do. He finished his coffee in one long swallow. And I'm guessing whoever's leading them isn't completely foolish. Foolish enough to come up here, smart enough to do it right. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Zeke positioned himself at the north window, watching the trail through a gap in the shutter. Judith took the south, her rifle propped and ready, her hands slick with nervous sweat despite the cold. Hours passed. The sun tracked across the sky, turning snow into fields of blinding white. Judith's eyes ached from staring at the landscape, searching for movement that never came. By nightfall, her nerves were stretched to breaking. Maybe they turned back. Maybe. Zeke didn't sound convinced. Or maybe they're making camp, waiting for morning. Be ready either way. They ate a cold dinner, not wanting smoke from cooking to give away their alertness. Then Zeke surprised her by climbing down from his watch position and moving to where she sat. Get some sleep, he said quietly. I'll take first watch. I can't sleep. You can and you will, because if this happens, you need to be sharp. Tired gets you killed. He pulled a blanket around her shoulders. 2 hours. Then you take over and I'll rest. Judith wanted to argue but couldn't find the energy. The adrenaline that had kept her wired all day was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. She lay down on the bed, certain she'd never sleep. She was unconscious in minutes. Zeke woke her before dawn, his hand on her shoulder, gentle but firm. Your turn. Nothing yet, but the light's coming. She took his position at the window, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Zeke lay down on the bed she'd vacated, and within moments his breathing evened out. The trust implicit in that, him sleeping while she kept watch, settled over her like weight and wings, both. Dawn came slowly, the sky lightening from black to gray to pale blue. Judith watched the trail, the tree line, every shadow that might hide a threat. The sun was fully up when she saw them. 3 figures, dark against the snow, moving up the trail with the caution of men who knew they were entering uncertain territory. Still too far to identify, but the shape of them, the number. It was them. Zeke, her voice came out steady despite the fear flooding her system. They're here, He was up instantly, moving to the north window, rifle in hand. He studied the approaching men for a long moment, then nodded. That's them. Raymond's in front. Big man behind him. That'll be his cousin, works the mill. Don't know the third. What do we do? We wait. Let them come close enough to talk, see what they want. He glanced at her. But we stay ready. They make a move. We respond. Clear? Clear. The men approached slowly, stopping about 50 yards out, close enough to call out, far enough to retreat if needed. Smart positioning. Judith felt her jaw clench. Raymond stepped forward, cupping his hands around his mouth. Judith Caro, we know you're in there. Caro, her old name. Like the marriage didn't count, didn't change anything. Zeke moved to the door but didn't open it, just raised his voice to Carrie. She's Judith Thorne now, and you're trespassing. State your business or leave. A pause. Then Raymond again, his voice taking on false reasonableness. We're not here to cause trouble, Thorne. We're from the settlement. Council sent us to check on Judith, make sure she's all right. She's fine, you can leave. We'd like to see her, talk to her ourselves, make sure she's here of her own will. Zeke looked at Judith, a question in his eyes. She shook her head firmly. No, she didn't want to talk to them, didn't trust this. She doesn't want to talk to you, Zeke called back. She's here by choice, married, legal, and proper. You've got no business with her. The big man behind Raymond said something too quiet to hear. Raymond nodded, then called out again. Thing is, we've got concerns. Woman like Judith, she's not suited for this kind of life. Too harsh, too isolated. We think maybe she wasn't thinking clearly when she agreed to this arrangement. Rage flared in Judith's chest. Not suited. The same judgment, different words. I'm thinking fine, she shouted before she could stop herself, and I'm not going anywhere with you. Raymond's face twisted. Even at this distance, she could see anger replace the false concern. Judith, be reasonable. You can't survive up here. You need to come back. Let us take care of this situation properly. There's no situation. Her hands tightened on the rifle. I'm married. I'm staying. Leave. The third man spoke up for the first time, his voice carrying an edge. We didn't come all this way to leave empty-handed. Council wants her back. We've got authorization to bring her, by force if necessary. There it was. The truth under the pretense. Zeke's voice dropped, going cold and hard. You don't have authorization to do anything on my land, and the woman told you no. You've got 1 minute to turn around and leave. After that, I start shooting. You're threatening us? Raymond stepped forward, puffing up. We're officers of the Settlement Council. You're interfering with official business. You're 3 men with no authority trying to take a woman against her will. Zeke raised his rifle, the barrel pointing through the gap in the shutter. That's kidnapping, and I defend what's mine. The big man pulled Raymond back, speaking urgently. They had a quick, heated discussion that Judith couldn't hear. Then Raymond turned back, his face red with fury. You can't keep her prisoner up here, Thorne. Someone's got to check on her welfare. She's not a prisoner. She's my wife. And you're out of time. Zeke fired once, the bullet kicking up snow 3 feet in front of Raymond. The 3 men scattered, diving for cover behind trees and rocks. That was your warning, Zeke shouted. Next one draws blood. Leave now. For a moment, Judith thought it might work. Thought they'd retreat, decide it wasn't worth the risk. Then the third man popped up from behind a boulder and fired back. The bullet slammed into the cabin wall a foot from the window. Wood splintered, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Down! Zeke dropped into a crouch, pulling Judith with him. They're committed now. No more talking. Gunfire erupted from multiple positions. The men had spread out, using the terrain for cover, taking turns firing to keep Zeke and Judith pinned. Zeke moved to a different window, returning fire with careful, measured shots. Don't waste ammunition. Make every shot count. Judith positioned herself at the south window, searching for targets. She saw movement behind a tree. The big man, reloading. She aimed, breathed, fired, missed. The bullet hit bark 6 inches left. Again, Zeke called, firing twice from his position. Just right. She did, firing again. This time the big man yelped and dropped back, clutching his shoulder. Hit, but not fatally. Good. Zeke didn't spare her a glance, focused on his own targets. Keep pressure on them. The fight settled into a rhythm, bursts of gunfire, pauses for reloading, shouted curses from outside. The men were pinned down but not retreating. They'd committed to this, and pride or stupidity or something worse was keeping them here. They're trying to flank. Judith spotted Raymond moving through the trees, trying to circle around to the east side. I see him. Zeke fired, forcing Raymond back. They're testing us, trying to find a weak point. What do? We hold. They can't get in, and we can wait longer than they can freeze out there. He reloaded with quick practice movements. Storm's coming tonight. They know it. They'll either commit fully or retreat before then. The men chose commitment. The big man, bleeding from his shoulder, made a desperate rush toward the barn. Zeke tracked him, fired twice. One bullet caught him in the leg, spinning him sideways. He went down hard, screaming. Raymond and the third man used the distraction to advance, getting within 30 yards. Too close. Way too close. Judith, the shotgun! Zeke tossed it to her. Anyone makes the door, you use that. Don't hesitate. She caught it, the weight unfamiliar and terrifying. This was real. This was happening. The third man broke from cover, running hard for the cabin. Zeke fired, missed. The angle was wrong. The man hit the cabin wall, out of sight from the windows. He's going for the door! Judith moved into position, shotgun raised. Wood splintered as the man kicked at the door. Once, twice. The latch held but wouldn't last. The door burst open. The man filled the doorway, pistol raised, face twisted with rage and fear and determination. His eyes locked on Judith. Time seemed to slow. Judith saw everything with crystalline clarity. The snow on his coat, the wild look in his eyes, the gun swinging toward her. She fired. The shotgun kicked like a mule, slamming into her shoulder. The man flew backward, hitting the snow outside, not moving. Judith stood frozen, the shotgun still raised, smoke curling from the barrel. She'd killed him. She'd actually killed him. Judith! Zeke's voice cut through her shock. Reload! Now! She moved on instinct, fumbling with shells, her hand shaking so badly she dropped two before managing to load the gun. Outside, Raymond was screaming, You killed him! You murdered him! He broke into my home! Judith screamed back, her voice breaking. He was going to shoot me! We were trying to help you. By killing us? Zeke fired again, keeping Raymond pinned. You're done here! Your man's dead. Your cousin's bleeding out. Leave now or join them. The big man was crawling through the snow, leaving a red trail, trying to reach cover. Raymond crouched behind a rock, his face visible in flashes. He looked terrified and furious in equal measure. This isn't over, Raymond shouted. We'll come back with more men. You can't... His words cut off as the wind picked up suddenly, viciously. The storm Zeke had predicted was arriving early, and it was coming in fast. Snow began to fall, thick and heavy. Visibility dropped within minutes. They need to leave now, or they'll die out there. Judith moved to the window, seeing the storm swallow the landscape. The big man's hurt. He won't survive this. That's his problem. Zeke kept his rifle trained on where Raymond had been. We gave them chances. They made their choices. Zeke, we can't just... Yes, we can. His voice was iron. They came here to take you, fired on us, broke into our home. One of them's dead because he tried to kill you. I'm not risking your life to save theirs. The wind howled, drowning out any sounds from outside. The cabin shook, snow driving against the walls with force. Zeke finally lowered his rifle and moved to the shattered door, forcing it closed and barricading it with furniture. Storm's going to be bad. If they're smart, they're already running for the tree line, trying to build shelter. And if they're not smart, then we'll find bodies in the spring thaw. He said it without emotion, just fact. I need to check that you're all right. Are you hurt? Judith looked down at herself, surprised to find no blood. No, I'm not hurt. Good. Zeke moved to her, gently taking the shotgun from her trembling hands. You did what you had to do. That man was going to kill you. You defended yourself. That's not murder. That's survival. I killed him. The words felt strange in her mouth, foreign and terrible. Yes, and you're alive because of it. Zeke set the shotgun aside and gripped her shoulders, making her look at him. I know it's hard. I know you're shaking and scared and feeling things you've never felt. But you need to hear this. You did nothing wrong. They came here. They fired first. They forced this. You just made sure it ended with you breathing. That's all. Judith nodded, tears she hadn't known she was crying freezing on her cheeks. Zeke pulled her against his chest, his arms coming around her, solid and warm and safe. "It's all right," he said quietly, one hand stroking her hair. "You're all right. I've got you." They stood like that while the storm raged outside, two people who'd survived something that should have broken them. Eventually Zeke pulled back. "I need to secure the cabin properly. Make sure nothing got damaged. You sit down, warm up. I'll handle it." Judith sank into the chair by the fire, watching him work. He moved methodically, checking windows, reinforcing the door, making sure the cabin was weather-tight, all while the storm tried to tear the world apart outside. Night fell early, the sky going dark and vicious. The wind screamed like something alive, battering the cabin with fists of snow and ice. Zeke lit lamps, built up the fire, moved the dead man's body from the doorway into the barn. He couldn't leave it in the cabin, and burying it in this storm was impossible. He worked without speaking, his face set and hard. When he finally sat down, he looked exhausted, not just physically, but in some deeper way. "Are you all right?" Judith asked quietly. "I've killed before," Zeke said after a moment. "War, back east, before I came here. I thought I was done with that, thought the mountain meant peace." He stared into the fire. "But violence follows, doesn't matter how far you run. This wasn't your fault. Wasn't yours either, but we're both carrying it now." He looked at her, and she saw the weight in his eyes. "That changes people, changes how you see the world. I'm sorry you had to learn that." "I'm not sorry I'm alive." "Good. Hold on to that. Because guilt will try to convince you otherwise. Guilt will say you should have found another way, should have done something different. But there wasn't another way. Sometimes survival is the only choice that matters." They sat in silence, listening to the storm destroy anything foolish enough to be caught in it. Judith thought about the men outside. Raymond and the big man, if they were still alive. The third man, definitely dead, now frozen in the barn. She waited to feel something, remorse, horror, satisfaction. Instead, she felt numb. And underneath the numbness, a strange, fierce certainty. She'd protected herself, protected her home, protected the life she was building, and she'd do it again if she had to. The storm lasted through the night and into the next day. When it finally broke, the world was buried under 3 feet of fresh snow. Zeke went out first, rifle ready, scanning for threats. He found the big man 50 yards from the cabin, frozen solid where he'd collapsed trying to crawl to safety. Raymond was gone. Tracks leading down the mountain suggested he'd fled during a break in the storm, abandoning his cousin to die. "Coward," Zeke said, studying the tracks. "Left him to save himself." They buried the 2 bodies as best they could, rolling them into a ravine and covering them with rocks and snow. It wasn't proper, wasn't respectful, but it was what the mountain allowed. "Will Raymond come back?" Judith asked, watching Zeke secure the last stones. "Maybe. Probably not." Zeke straightened, brushing snow from his gloves. He's got to explain to the settlement why 2 men died on a fool's errand. He fires on a legal marriage, gets people killed. That's on him. Council won't back him. They'll cut him loose to save themselves. "So we're safe. We're always safe up here. Because up here, we make the rules." Zeke looked at her, and she saw something new in his eyes. Partnership. Equality. Respect earned in blood and survival. "You stood with me. Fought beside me. Killed to protect what's ours. That's not nothing, Judith. That's everything." She met his gaze and didn't look away. "I chose this life. I'll defend it. I know you will." He reached out, taking her hand in his, the first real touch of affection since they'd married. "I see you now, all of you. The strength, the courage, the will. You're not too much. You never were. You're exactly what this place needs, what I need." Judith felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been locked tight for years. Not just acceptance, recognition, being seen for who she actually was, not who people thought she should be. "I'm not who I was," she said quietly. "That woman died in Black Hollow Ridge. This is who I am now." "Then I'm glad I met her." Zeke squeezed her hand. "Come on, let's go home." They walked back to the cabin together through snow that sparkled in the sun, 2 survivors in a world that had tried to break them and failed. The cabin felt different after the violence, not physically. Zeke had repaired the door, patched the bullet holes in the walls, scrubbed the blood from the threshold. But the space itself had changed, like a place that had witnessed something fundamental and couldn't forget it. Or maybe it was them who had changed. Judith caught herself doing it sometimes, pausing mid-task to listen for footsteps that wouldn't come, scanning the tree line for movement that was just wind and shadow. The hypervigilance that had kept her alive during the attack wouldn't quite let go. Zeke noticed. Of course he did. "It gets easier," he said one morning, finding her frozen at the window, staring out at nothing. "Not gone, just easier to carry." "How long did it take you?" "After the war?" "Years." He moved beside her, following her gaze out into the white landscape. "But I was alone then, had nothing but my own thoughts circling. You've got me, and I've got you. That helps." It did help. Having someone who understood, who'd been through their own version of hell and come out the other side. They didn't talk about the attack much. What was there to say? But the shared knowledge of it lived between them like a bond forged in fire. The nightmares came anyway. Judith would wake gasping, the man's face filling her vision, the shotgun kicking in her hands, the moment of his death replaying on an endless loop. Sometimes she'd lie there in the dark, shaking, trying to convince herself she'd had no choice. The fourth night, Zeke climbed down from the loft and sat on the edge of her bed without asking permission. "Tell me," he said quietly. "I keep seeing him, the moment, over and over." "I know." Zeke's hand found hers in the darkness. "Your mind's trying to process something it was never meant to handle. Killing goes against everything we're taught about being human, but so does dying when you could have lived. Does it ever stop? The dreams? Eventually they come less often. The memory? No, that stays." He squeezed her hand. "But here's what I learned. You don't have to carry it alone. You can hand me half the weight. That's what this is. What we are. Partners in survival." Something in Judith's chest eased, just slightly. She turned her hand in his, lacing their fingers together. "I don't regret it. That's what scares me. I killed a man, and I don't regret it." "That's not wrong. That's honest." Zeke's thumb traced circles on her palm. "Regret would mean wishing you'd made a different choice. What different choice was there? Let him shoot you? Let them take you? That's not noble. That's just death wearing a prettier name. The settlement would say I should have found another way. The settlement threw you out for being inconvenient. Their opinion stopped mattering the day we left." He shifted, and she felt the bed dip under his weight. "You want to know what I think? I think you're stronger than you ever knew. I think you looked death in the face and chose to live. And I think anyone who judges you for that has never had to make that choice themselves." Judith lay there in the dark, feeling his presence beside her, solid and real. "Will you stay? Just for tonight?" "Yeah." Zeke settled against the headboard, still holding her hand. "I'll stay." She fell asleep like that, his hand in hers, and the nightmares didn't come. When she woke, he was gone, back to the loft, giving her space, respecting boundaries even in comfort. But something had shifted between them. Some wall had come down in the night and hadn't gone back up. Winter deepened around them, brutal and relentless. The storms came more frequently now, each one testing the cabin's defenses, testing their preparedness. But they were ready, always ready. Judith had learned the rhythms of mountain survival so thoroughly they'd become instinct. She could read weather in the pressure behind her eyes, could judge the stability of snow by sound, could navigate the trapline in near whiteout conditions by counting steps and trusting her memory. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, competent, and capable in ways she'd never been allowed to be in Black Hollow Ridge. One morning, checking the traps, she found a wolf caught by its leg. Not one of the pair that had tested her. This one was smaller, younger, its eyes rolling white with pain and fear. The old Judith would have called for Zeke, let him handle it. The new Judith knelt in the snow, speaking low and steady while she approached with the rifle. "I'm sorry, this wasn't meant for you. You were just hungry and unlucky." The wolf snarled, snapping at her, but she could see the exhaustion in it, the resignation. She fired once, clean and quick, and the wolf went still. Freeing it from the trap, she examined the pelt. Good quality, thick winter coat. She skinned it there, working efficiently, wasting nothing. The meat she'd bring back for the dogs they'd eventually get. Zeke had mentioned it. how dogs would help with hunting and provide warning. She reset the trap and continued the line. The wolf's pelt rolled and secured to her pack. When she returned to the cabin, Zeke was working on something at his bench. He looked up, saw the pelt, and nodded approval. "Clean work," he said, examining it. "Getting better with the knife." "Had a good teacher." Judith set down her pack, brushing snow from her coat. "It was just a yearling. Wrong place, wrong time." "That's the mountain. Doesn't pick favorites." Zeke returned to his work. She could see now he was carving something, wood shavings curling under his knife. "You did right by it, quick and clean." Judith moved closer, watching his hands shape the wood. "What are you making?" "Cradle." The word came out casual, but she felt the weight of it. Her breath caught. "Zeke, I know what I said. About not expecting anything, about letting things develop." He didn't look up from his work, but his hands had stilled. "But I'm a practical man, Judith. And practically speaking, you've been here 4 months now. We've shared a home, shared danger, shared survival. We sleep 10 feet apart, and I hear you breathe every night. I know how you take your coffee, what makes you laugh, what makes you angry. I know you're brave and strong and more stubborn than you think." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't want separate beds anymore, don't want that distance." Now he did look up, and the vulnerability in his eyes caught her off guard. "I want a real marriage. Want children, yes, but more than that, I want partnership. Want to build something here that lasts. But only if you want it too." Judith stood there, her heart hammering, processing what he was offering. Not ownership, not obligation. Choice. Always choice. She thought about the past months, how she'd gone from terrified refugee to capable mountain woman, how Zeke had taught her without condescension, trusted her without hesitation, stood beside her when violence came calling, how he'd held her hand in the dark and chased away nightmares just by being present, how somewhere along the way, this rough man with his quiet strength had become her partner in more than just survival. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of me? Of wanting this. Of letting myself have it and losing it." She moved closer, close enough to touch him. "I've lost everything before. My parents, my home, my place in the world. I built walls to survive that, and you're asking me to take them down. I'm asking you to trust that I'll still be here when you do." Zeke set down his carving, giving her his full attention. "I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen. Can't promise I won't die in a storm or a fall or just old age eventually. But I can promise I won't leave by choice. Won't decide you're too much or too difficult or too anything. You're exactly right, Judith, and I want to spend whatever time we've got proving that to you." She kissed him. It wasn't graceful or romantic. She basically fell forward, her cold hands grabbing his shirt, her mouth finding his with more determination than skill. He caught her, steadied her, kissed her back with a gentleness that made her chest ache. When they broke apart, she was crying. Not sad tears, something else. Relief, maybe. Or joy. Or just the release of 4 months of tension and fear and careful distance. "Is that a yes?" Zeke asked, his voice rough with emotion. "That's a yes." Judith laughed, the sound watery but real. "To all of it. The marriage, the partnership, the—" She glanced at the half-carved cradle. "The future, whatever that looks like." "It'll look like this," Zeke said, pulling her close. "You and me and the mountain. Hard work and harder winters. But we'll face it together." That night, Judith climbed the loft ladder for the first time as more than a curious visitor. Zeke had made space for her things, had clearly been preparing for this possibility even while giving her time to choose it. They lay together in the narrow space, wrapped in blankets and each other, and talked until the fire burned low. About dreams and fears and the life they'd build. About children, maybe, someday, if it happened, and the kind of parents they wanted to be. About growing old on this mountain, becoming the strange hermits future settlers would whisper about. "They'll say we're crazy," Judith murmured against his chest. "Living up here alone." "Let them." Zeke's hand traced patterns on her back. "We know the truth. Sometimes the crazy choice is the sanest one you can make." She fell asleep feeling safer than she had since childhood, wrapped in the arms of a man who saw her clearly and wanted her anyway. Spring came eventually, as it always did, The snow began its slow retreat, revealing the world beneath. Green pushed through white, stubborn and determined. The creek thawed, its voice returning after months of silence. Birds came back, filling the morning with sound. Judith stood outside the cabin one morning, feeling the sun on her face. Real warmth, not just the pale winter imitation, and breathed in air that smelled like possibility. Behind her, she heard Zeke moving around in the barn. They'd expanded it over the winter, adding space for the dogs they'd get in summer, for the chickens they'd breed, for the future they were building. Her hand moved to her stomach, where a new life was just beginning to make itself known. Too early to be sure, but her body knew. The slight nausea in the mornings, the tenderness, the bone-deep certainty. She'd tell Zeke tonight. Would watch his face light up with that quiet joy he wore when something mattered to him. But for now, she stood in the morning sun and thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the meeting house in Black Hollow Ridge, where they'd declared her worthless, to this mountain where she'd discovered her worth for herself. She wasn't the woman who'd stood before those elders 4 months ago. That Judith had been beaten down, made small by judgment and rejection, had believed the lies they told about her until she couldn't see her own strength. This Judith knew better, knew that being too much for small minds just meant you were meant for bigger spaces. Knew that survival wasn't just enduring, it was choosing, fighting, building something worth surviving for. The settlement had tried to exile her. Instead, they'd freed her. A sound made her turn. Zeke emerged from the barn, saw her standing there, and smiled. Not his usual small quirk of lips, but a full smile that transformed his face. He crossed to her, took her hand. "What are you thinking about?" "About how far we've traveled." She laced her fingers through his. "Not just in miles. Regret any of it." Judith looked at him, this man who'd offered marriage as a transaction and turned it into a partnership, who'd seen strength in her when everyone else saw inconvenience, who'd taught her to survive and then taught her to live. "Not a single moment," she said. They stood together watching the mountain wake from winter, two people who'd found each other in exile and built something neither could have built alone. The mountain still tested them. Summers brought their own challenges, fires, floods, the constant work of preparing for the next winter. Animals still threatened. The isolation still pressed in sometimes, made them sharp with each other, forced them to remember that loving someone didn't mean never being angry with them. But they learned to navigate it, learned when to push and when to give space, learned that partnership meant choosing each other every day, not just one once. The baby came in late autumn, a girl with her mother's determination and her father's steady gaze. They named her Sarah, after Judith's mother, and she was exactly as demanding and stubborn as a mountain child needed to be. Zeke proved to be a patient father, the same way he'd been a patient teacher. He'd walk the floor with Sarah for hours when she wouldn't sleep, speaking to her in that low, steady voice about the mountain, about survival, about the world she'd inherit. Judith would watch them from the bed and feel her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. 2 years later, a boy arrived. Thomas, for her father. Then another girl. Then another boy. Each one healthy, each one born into a life of harsh beauty and hard work and unconditional belonging. They grew into themselves on the mountain, learning to trap and hunt and read weather signs before they could properly read books. Learning that family wasn't about being perfect, it was about showing up, doing the work, choosing each other when the easy thing would be to quit. Judith taught them what the settlement had never taught her. That worth wasn't measured in how well you fit someone else's expectations. That being different wasn't a flaw. That strength came in many forms, and the strongest thing you could do was be exactly who you were without apology. Zeke taught them practical skills, yes, but also something deeper. That respect was earned through competence and character. That violence was sometimes necessary, but never liked. That the mountain would teach you if you listened, and kill you if you didn't. Together, they taught them that love was a choice and a commitment, not just a feeling. That it looked like waking up every day and choosing partnership over convenience. Like standing together when storms came, literal and metaphorical. Like building something bigger than yourself and protecting it with everything you had. Sometimes when the children were asleep and the cabin was quiet, Judith would think about Black Hollow Ridge. Wonder what had become of the settlement, if it still existed, if Raymond had ever faced consequences for the deaths he'd caused. But mostly, she didn't think about it at all. That life belonged to someone else, someone small and scared and convinced she had to shrink to deserve space in the world. This life belonged to Judith Thorne, mountain woman, wife, mother, survivor. Someone who'd learned that exile could be liberation if you were brave enough to build something new from the ashes of rejection. She'd learned that sometimes the thing you think will break you actually frees you. That losing everything can teach you what actually matters. That the people who reject you are often doing you a favor, even if it doesn't feel like it at the time. Most importantly, she had learned that you don't find yourself in the approval of others. You find yourself in the mirror of your own choices, in the things you build when no one's watching, in the person you become when all the pretense is stripped away. The mountain had stripped everything false from her, had shown her exactly who she was when survival was the only thing that mattered, and who she was turned out to be enough, more than enough. Exactly right. Years passed. The children grew, eventually leaving to build their own lives, some staying on the mountain, some venturing into the growing towns below, all of them carrying the lessons they'd learned about strength and choice and becoming. Judith and Zeke grew old together, their bodies wearing down but their partnership solid as the mountain itself. They'd survived everything the wilderness could throw at them, had built a life that outlasted judgment and exile and violence. On cold nights, they'd sit by the fire like they had in those early days. But now the silence between them was comfortable, full of shared history and hard-won peace. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you'd stayed?" Zeke asked one evening, his hand finding hers automatically. "No." Judith's answer was immediate and certain. "Because staying would have killed me. Maybe not physically, but everything that mattered. I'd have become exactly what they said I was. Too much, taking up space I didn't deserve. I'd have believed it eventually. And now? Now I know better. I deserve every inch of space I take up. Fought for it, earned it, built it with my own hands." She squeezed his hand. "We both did." "No regrets?" Judith looked around the cabin they'd built together, literally, having expanded it twice over the years, at the life they'd created from nothing but determination and choice. "Only that I didn't leave sooner," she said. Zeke laughed, that rare, full sound that still made her heart lift. "Fair enough." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd traveled from strangers to partners to something deeper than either had words for. Who'd learned that real love wasn't about completion or perfection. It was about showing up consistently and choosing each other when things got hard. And things had gotten hard. The mountain made sure of that. But they'd survived it together, and in surviving, had discovered something the settlement could never have taught them. That belonging wasn't something given to you by others. It was something you claimed for yourself. Something you built through choices and commitment and refusing to accept anyone else's definition of your worth. That freedom wasn't the absence of hardship. It was the presence of choice. The ability to say yes or no and live with the consequences without someone else's judgment weighing you down. That family wasn't about blood or tradition or meeting expectations. It was about who showed up when things got hard, who stood beside you when the mountain howled, who saw you at your worst and chose to stay anyway. Outside, the wind picked up, testing the cabin the way it had for decades. Inside, the fire burned steady and warm. Judith leaned against Zeke's shoulder, feeling the solid reality of him, and thought about that young woman who'd stood before the council in Black Hollow Ridge. The one who'd believed their judgment mattered more than her own knowledge of herself. If she could go back and tell that woman anything, it would be this. The people who reject you are not the arbiters of your worth. They're just scared people in a small place, trying to make everyone else small enough to fit their limited vision. You don't have to fit. You don't have to shrink. You don't have to accept their verdict as truth. You can walk away. You can choose differently. You can build something new in a place that has room for exactly who you are. It won't be easy. It might be brutal and terrifying and require strength you don't think you have. But you do have it. And when you find someone who sees it, who respects it, who stands beside you instead of trying to diminish it, that's when you know you've found home. Not in a place, in a choice, in a partnership built on mutual respect and shared survival and the daily decision to keep choosing each other. That's what the mountain had taught her, what Zeke had shown her, what she'd discovered for herself through blood and storms and the simple act of refusing to quit. She was Judith Thorne, mountain woman, survivor, mother, wife, partner. And she was exactly, perfectly, undeniably enough. The fire crackled. The wind howled. The mountains stood eternal outside their door. Inside, two people who'd found each other in exile sat together in the home they'd built from rejection and determination, and knew without question that they'd made the right choice. Every hard day, every brutal winter, every moment of doubt and fear and struggle. Worth it, all of it, because they'd chosen it, chosen each other, chosen to survive and then to live. And in the end, that choice, that daily, deliberate, defiant choice to keep going, keep building, keep becoming, was the only victory that mattered.